Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome aboard to the Thursday edition of the HockeyDebates.com podcast. I'm Bob Duff. I'm joined, as always, by Hall of Fame hockey writer Kevin Allen. Sadly, technological issues in Vancouver are preventing our third member of the team, Sasha Peruk from SportsBettingDime.com, to come on board today. So Kevin and I are just going to wing it together. Of course, Thursdays we always talk about betting in the NHL, and while neither Kevin or I are experts on the subject like Sasha, we'll do our best. And I'm going to start right off the bat, Kevin. Back in April, I wrote a betting piece on a prop bet that was out there relating to the new Seattle NHL team and what the nickname of the team was going to be. And at the time, Sockeyes was the overwhelming minus 200 favorite to win this decision, which is we're all still waiting for. Now, yesterday, some speculation leaked out, speculation that's since been denied by the Seattle team, that they were going to go with the nickname Kraken. And I understand you think that's a great nickname.
Well, I do. But, what I find amazing about all this now is, back in the old days, I know the story, as you probably do as well, that the Pittsburgh Penguins were named because one of the owner's wives, an owner, his wife, liked that name, and that's why they became the Penguins. And at the time, the players on the team and the general manager and the coach all thought it was ridiculous. And of course, that's now one of the storied franchises in the NHL. Well, today everything is done with great research. They pay attention to what the fans want and what will work well with marketing and everything else. And I think the Sockeyes was an overwhelming favorite, but I think the Kraken, it's a sea monster of sorts. And anybody in the U.S. who's seen I think it's Geico, if I'm not mistaken, but they have the commercial where there's a Kraken in a water hazard at a golf tournament. So I think everybody was sort of caught on what a Kraken is. And, just to me, it just seems kind of funny and memorable. I mean, I think, we just looked up before we came on the air, released the Kraken, which is from the Clash of the Titans movie. And I think people can relate to that. But, I think there's several names. I like Kraken much better than the Totems. I'm not sure why that bothers me, but I know that was a very popular name too, because there was a former team, right, that was there?
Western Hockey League, when it was a pro league,
right.
Had the Seattle Totems.
Right. And I normally like the kind of the history, but I just have never liked that name very well. But I don't know. Do you think they really mean it when they said it hasn't been decided, or do you think they're just kind of covering up because someone beat them to the punch?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you say makes a lot of sense. Release the Kraken, I can just see them playing that clip from the movie Clash of the Titans as the team bursts onto the ice to start the game. And as we both know, everything evolves around marketing today. You look at the Vegas Golden Knights and what they've accomplished from a marketing standpoint. Like going to one of their games is just an event in itself, regardless of the outcome of the game on the ice. The entertainment factor, everyone I've talked to that goes to a game in Vegas, they say, you'll never forget it. It's completely different than any other NHL venue. Now, what I find kind of hilarious, the Sockeyes, the reason why it's fallen out of favor is the NHL, is Gary Bettman was in Seattle last spring and was touting, kind of hinting that Sockeyes was going to be the name. Ted Lewicki, who's involved with the franchise, also has kind of hinted at that. The Seattle Times, the newspaper in the town, ran a reader poll, and Sockeyes was the overwhelming choice. So everyone and everything was pointing to that being the name. But a little research, and they've discovered that there's a series of romance novels out there written by a woman named Jamie Davenport, and they're built around this fictional hockey team called the Seattle Sockeyes. They've got such great titles as Shutdown Player. It's a 9-book series, in case you're interested in ordering it on Amazon. Melting Ice is another popular title for these books, and Crashing the Net. And apparently, Jamie Davenport, the author, has released a whole line of merchandise for her fictional team with jerseys, team colors, all kinds of paraphernalia relating to the team. And now the Seattle ownership and the NHL is, of course, fearful of getting into some kind of trademark violation and getting into a legal battle. So it looks like when they say hockey's for everyone, I guess it's not for anyone who reads romance novels.
I guess not. For those who are not familiar with the Kraken, it's spelled Kraken, and I'm reading the definition here online. The Kraken is a legendary cephalopod-like sea monster of giant size in Scandinavian folklore. According to Norse sagas, the Kraken dwells off the coasts of Norway and Greenland and terrorizes nearby sailors. So just perfect for the NHL. I like it. I wonder if the resistance there is the fact that it's not native to the Seattle area, that it's it's a European monster as opposed to a North American monster. Maybe that's part of the resistance, because not everybody loves the name, but you never please everyone. It's the same thing too. Like you pointed out that, like, what an experience, and I can testify to that because I covered the Golden Knights in their run to the final and saw several games there in the postseason, and it's just an amazing pregame ceremony. Yet there are a lot of traditionalists around the National Hockey League that don't like that, and to me, it's a simple solution. If the game starts at 8:15, tune in at 8:17 and see the start of the game, and you won't have to watch that. But for some reason, people just can't come to grips with that, and they just want to complain about how it's just so horrible that Vegas, turns it into a glitzy, pregame show, and that's not hockey. That's not hockey tradition. Well, don't watch, because some of us who go there do like it, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's like going to a Broadway show, or in this case, a Vegas show. Before the game starts, there's usually some sort of performance on the ice, and there's a storyline, and you're doing something to the opposing characters. If you're playing the Ducks, you're beating up on Ducks and so forth, and the Golden Knight comes out, and it's great. Well, you can do a lot with Kraken. I think that could be a lot of fun with what they could do, especially if they're going to make the playoffs. And in the old days, expansion teams, they weren't expected to win right away, but I got to believe the Kraken will be listed on the board as a Stanley Cup contender in that first season, based on what the Golden Knights did.
Yeah, and you remember the kerfuffle over the Vegas nickname, and the Golden Knights, they got into a battle with the London Knights, the junior hockey team, over the name. There was also concern that Golden Knights was the nickname of Army's sports teams at West Point. So it just seems like, the more teams you get, the harder it is to find a nickname, because most of them are taken.
Well, and to be honest, the West Point had a legitimate beef, because the team was named because the owner is a West Point graduate. So he was certainly familiar with that name as well. But his argument was there'd be no confusion, and everybody sort of knows that the Golden Knights is West Point. There would be no confusion between them and an NHL team, and I guess that was proven, or I don't know what happened, but obviously they were able to name their team the Golden Knights.
Maybe their worry is that if they call the team the Kraken, people will start referring to Seattle fans as the Crackheads.
Well, maybe it's hard to say. It's you never know what will evolve. Like, I'm sure when they nicknamed the Pittsburgh franchise the Penguins, nobody guessed that they'd be called the Pens, which they are often called. You just don't know what it'll evolve into, and you just don't know what the fan base will generate. So I guess and a lot of it is dictated by the performance level. I live in the Detroit area. In the 1970s, the team was so horrible, the Red Wings became the Dead Wings, and pretty much everybody in the city called them that. And it was hard to remove that stain, that nickname, even after they got going, until they really proved themselves again.
And I mean, people think the old school original six so-called teams have this wonderful tradition about all that has to do with them. But the Boston Bruins, for example, they get their colors from Charles Adams, the first owner of the team, owned a chain of grocery stores in Massachusetts. and that was the colors of his grocery store. So he thought it'd be a great idea to promote his grocery stores if he put his hockey team in the same colors. So all this great tradition people think these old school teams have, there's a lot of cornball stuff involved with how they came to be.
Yeah, and the Bruins are often known to fans of the bees. You hear that often if you're out in Massachusetts. It's just sometimes you go through all this great marketing, and the fan base is going to call them what they want to call them. After a while, depending on whether or not they are in love with the nickname or not.
Well, let's move on. We don't want to spend our whole day talking about nicknames. The Atlantic Division in the NHL is getting very interesting. To probably, I guess, no one's real surprised, the Tampa Bay Lightning all of a sudden looked like the same Tampa Bay Lightning we watched win the records tying 62 games last season. And the sports books never really got down on Tampa Bay, even when they were struggling and were not in a playoff position. They never went higher than odds of plus 1,200. Of course, they opened the season as the Stanley Cup favorite, and now two of the biggest online sports books out there, Bet Online and Bovada, are both listing Tampa Bay again as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And are the Lightning back to what you thought they'd be, Kevin?
Yeah, for sure. And that's the difference between fans and the odds makers in Vegas who rely on logic and analytics and so forth. Like they're not emotional about the team. So, I think the fan base in Tampa and hockey fans in general watched what was going on with Tampa. And, all of a sudden their mind went to last season when the team didn't perform well in the postseason and got swept after their tremendous regular season. And, of course, the verdict was, well, this is a chemistry problem. This is a culture problem. And this won't be able to be corrected. And see, I told you so, because they got off to a bad start. But I'm sure the odds makers in Tampa Bay looked at it and said, look, this is a very talented team. This is a team that won a lot of games last year. This is a team that's certainly good enough to win the cup. And, now they've gotten it together. And John Cooper told me in an interview in early December that he felt the team was actually playing the same or better than they did last season when they set the franchise record for wins, but they just didn't have as many lucky saves, and they just ran out of luck. And Vasilevsky, their fine goaltender, made some unbelievable, spectacular saves a year ago that he wasn't able to make at the start of this season. So I think they're the formidable group that we thought. Do they still have to prove they can win in the postseason? For sure. There is something to knowing how to win in the postseason, but I think they're a legitimate favorite to win it all. But it's real tough coming out of that division, because the Bees are very good, the Bruins are very good. There's some good teams. Florida's come on, although I don't see them as much of a playoff factor. But you never know. I mean, they're a hard team to figure out right now. And then one team that I do want to talk about when we're done talking about the Lightning is the Maple Leafs, because I want to pose a question to you. But, give me your thought, Bob, on Tampa Bay. Do you think they're back to where they were last season and last regular season?
Yeah, and I think one of the guys you just mentioned is a key reason why Vasilevsky looks like Vasilevsky again. He just came off a 10-game winning streak. And the thing I've noticed about them, Tampa Bay, in their last 17, 18 games, yeah, they're scoring like they always score, but they're not giving up goals. So all of a sudden they're only, most of those games they've given up 2 or less. And generally, when you can keep the goals against under 3, you're going to win 9 out of 10 games. It's just a fact of life. You don't have to work as hard. And another curious betting odds relating to the Lightning, they're still heavily favoring, these same sportsbooks are still heavily favoring Boston to win the Atlantic Division, but they think Tampa Bay will win the Cup. And it's kind of interesting. I look back, I believe it's 5 of the last 6 Stanley Cup champions were not first place teams. So there's always been this debate about, is it worth killing yourself in the regular season to get the top seed, or should you just worry about getting in and getting yourself safely in so you don't have to fight right to the end to get in, and then ramping it up in the playoffs.
Well, this is my theory on that, Bob. I've noticed that generally what ends up happening is, you win your division, you're comfortable, but the team that you get to play has had to been in playoff mode for 2 months trying to earn that last wild card spot, and the team that usually wins it has won 9 out of 10 or 11 out of 13 or you know 15 out of 17 to win that spot. So they're hot. So the reward for winning your division is often that you play one of the hottest teams in the league, a team that had to be that hot in order to get to the postseason. So I think you're almost better off to be that second spot. And you play that third place team that probably been just as cozy as you have in terms of their playoff participation, have had it sort of locked up for a while and haven't had to fight quite like the wild card team. So I think there's actually some logic to the idea that you'd be better off as a division seed not to have that wild card team, that play a team that is known for a while they're in the playoffs and may not have had to go on the incredible streak in order to get there. So I sort of get that why maybe division winners aren't winning the cup as much as you would expect.
A team that we certainly both watched pretty intently, the Detroit Red Wings, who, like the Lightning last year, were the other team that won 62 games in a season. Everyone expected them to win the Stanley Cup. They didn't flame out as badly as the Lightning did, but they lost in the conference final to Colorado. The next season they came back, much like Tampa Bay this year, didn't start out that great, never were really a legitimate first-place contender. I think they came in second or third in their division. And I remember right around this time of year at the All-Star break chatting with the Wings captain, then Steve Yzerman, and he said, I feel better about this team's chances of winning the Cup than I did last year. And I thought that was kind of a puzzling statement. But then when they did win the Cup, I asked him about it. I said, you believed in this team. You told me at the All-Star break that you thought this team had a better chance to win. And where was that belief from? And he reasoned why they had become tougher to play against. They weren't going to be an easy out in the playoffs because they knew how to play with a lead. They knew how to defend, and they were just more suited for playoff hockey than the 96 team. And maybe Tampa Bay, like the Wings, learned the lessons the hard way this year. We'll see a team that we expected last year.
Well, I think there's logic to that as well. I've said, one thing that I've learned covering the league for as long as I have is that you really do need to lose in the playoffs before you understand how to win. And by that, I mean, there's a process and a grind that needs to be sort of understood before you find success. And some teams are lucky enough to sort of learn it on the fly, or they have enough players on the team that, kind of know what it takes. But, if you ever wondered why, GMs are always looking for guys with, a Stanley Cup final or championship experiences, is because, there's a process that needs to be understood. And, they want guys in the room who can say, hey, look, no need to panic here. I've been through this before. You can lose 2 games and you just got to win this next game. You need someone with a kind of a calm presence. And, you've seen that with a lot of teams, like, the Capitals finally won after many years. Well, they knew a lot about losing before they understood how to win. And I think the same is true for goalies as well. I often talk about Eddie Belfour, who's been in the news recently as, having been arrested in, I believe it was Bowling Green, Kentucky, for maybe going a little bit too far with alcohol use. But Eddie Belfour, if you recall, was always blamed for postseason failures until he won. And then all of a sudden, everybody viewed him as a Hall of Fame goalie. Like, everybody knew he was good even when he was losing, but they say, well, he didn't know how to win in the postseason. Well, the reason he figured it out is because he lost a lot, and you sort of learn by that, and you sort of kind of need that in order to to be able to have the success that you want. By losing, you sort of understand where you went wrong, and then you figure it out and you're able to win. So maybe that's what people are seeing with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They've, this wasn't their first rodeo loss. Like they've been to the final. A lot of the guys on this group as well, and they know a lot about losing in the postseason as well. And maybe everyone figures, hey, at least bettors that now they'll be ready to win now.
Does anybody or any celebrity for that matter on the planet have as much fun when they get arrested as Ed Belfour? And he's grinning from ear to ear in his mugshot this time. Last time it was, didn't he offer the police $1 billion if they'd let him go?
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about that thing is, didn't he look great?
Yeah,
like most people.
This guy never be arrested.
Yeah, he looked like he was tanned and ready to go on a vacation to the Caribbean. Like I was just stunned by that. No one likes their mugshots usually, but that's probably one of the best photos that Ed Belfour has ever taken. Like it was an awesome photo. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about, since we're already in the Atlantic too. I thought about this last night in watching Toronto and Dallas, and as we all know, the Maple Leafs are one of the best offensive teams in the league. I think they're ranked third in goals per game average, but I think they're first overall in goals scored. And of course, we all know their defensive deficiencies. Like, it's well documented that ultimately it cost Mike Babcock his job, is that they just didn't improve. That they're not a team that can prevent the puck from entering their net. Their defensive coverage is terrible. And, everybody has seen this act before. And what we always say is this doesn't work in the postseason. You can't win being an offensive team. But here's my question to you today, Bob. Why can't it work? Like, yesterday, Dallas is the number one defensive team in the league. 2.5 goals per game they're giving up. And, Toronto's a dynamic offense now. Like Austin Matthews, I mean, they've been this way for a while, but Austin Matthews, is scoring goals in so many different ways. And Marner, of course, is dangerous. And, they got Nylander and Kapanen, and they got a lot of weapons. And when they're going strong, they're hard to corral. It's hard to prevent them from scoring. But, we just, we talk about this as if it's gospel, that, you got to be able to play, prevent goals in order to win the playoffs, because we say it's a different game. But, why can't you just go in and say, if, look, we're not great defensive, but we'll try the best we can. But, if they get 2, we'll get 3. And if they get 3, we'll get 4. So, why doesn't that ever work with a good offensive team?
Well, I think it has worked. I mean, it worked for the Penguins the first time they won the Cup, certainly not so much maybe in 91, but in 92, they were well down the list in goals against. They were not a team that kept the puck out of the net. But
that was 30 years ago, Bob.
I know. But it has happened. I think the Oilers in the 80s were another example of where it can be done. But I think the key is you've also got to be able to win that 1-0, 2-1 game when you have to, because at some point you're going to have to win a game that way. And I think from just a standpoint of someone who enjoys the game of hockey, I think it would be fantastic if a team like Toronto won the Stanley Cup, because they play an entertaining hockey. They're fun to watch. You don't ever tune in a Leaf game and get bored. You might get, Leaf fans certainly get mad a lot of nights, but I don't think they're boring to watch. You got a guy like Austin Matthews with 20 goals his last 21 games, and you got John Tavares, who surprisingly people in the media in Toronto are complaining about his play. He's got 20 points in the last 21 games. And we don't even talk about Mitch Marner, it seems, anymore. And they got so many weapons on that team. It would be great. I'd rather watch that than watch guys diving in front of pucks or huddles in front of the net to block all the shots from getting through. I'd much prefer hockey being a more wide open, entertaining game. And if some team like the Leafs could win the Cup, then maybe other coaches would say, hey, that formula can work. Let's try it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody wants to do that. You don't want to go in. I mean, we've had good offensive teams win the Cup. There have been teams that have led the league in goals that have won the Cup for sure. But, I'm just saying, like the combination of Toronto has right now, where they're third in goals, 4 and 21st or 22nd in goals against. I mean, the gap there is so wide that it just seems ridiculous. But I don't know. Is it possible that they could beat the odds and win with a gap like that in terms of goals for and goals against. It doesn't seem likely, in my opinion. And if I was Kyle Dubas, I'd be looking for some defensive-minded defensemen because one thing we have seen is we've seen some defenses. I think the Penguins were a good example of that. The year Letang was injured and they won the cup just recently when they won the back-to-back cups. You look at their defense that they won with minus Letang, and it looked pretty average, pretty normal. The Devils, got to a final against LA with a group of guys. And the following year, I remember going around and saying to people, can you name one defenseman on last year's New Jersey Devils team? Because they were really a no-name, defense as well. So, it's just an interesting thing that, we just talk about it all the time, which I think is, right because it is true. But you mentioned the Oilers. Obviously I go back to the Oilers. I covered those Oilers teams. And the one thing that's often forgot about that is they could win the 1-0 game because they had Grant Fuhr. But more importantly, like their defense was underrated. Kevin Lowe was a very fine defensive player. Randy Gregg, they were a big group. Like they were all, 210, 215 pounds, except for Paul Coffey. And then he had the puck and he was gone. And, I'll use the one famous Wayne Gretzky quote, if I have the puck, the other team can't score, that's good defense. And Paul Coffey played defense that way. He had the puck. You couldn't get it from him. He was up the ice with it. So, when he was on the ice, the other team wasn't usually scoring. Although saying that, he had some pretty wicked plus minuses at various times in his career. But so anyway, it's just a food for thought. I was thinking about that yesterday. It would be interesting and fun to see if the Maple Leafs could make an extended run with the team as it is configured now, with a incredibly gifted offense and a defensive group that ranks in the bottom third, and see if they can do something with it.
Well, I think one thing I like about what Sheldon Keefe has done in Toronto is he's not trying to fit square pegs into round holes. I think Mike Babcock was trying to get players to play the game that they weren't best suited to play. And Sheldon Keefe looks to have kind of decided, okay, this is the personnel I've got. This is the type of game we play best. Let's see how far we can go with it. And I think, that's the way I think you should coach a team. You coach the personnel you have. You don't try to fit the players into the system. You fit the system to the players. And I think I give Keefe a lot of credit for that.
I'm with you.
Yeah. But just, you look at the matchups too. They could probably get the Lightning in the first round. And that's, I think, for Toronto's personnel, that's a better Stanley Cup matchup than playing the Bruins again. And, they are going to have to go through the Bruins at some point to win the Cup, but not to get them right off the bat. And you win a series and maybe you get a little confidence and Boston doesn't look as imposing as they have in the past springs.
Yeah, because I don't think it would take much to persuade the Lightning to trade chances with you.
Yeah.
They might just get caught up in the, kind of a shinny type, atmosphere there, where the Bruins, that's not going to happen. The Bruins are not going to trade chances, even though they have a good offensive team as well. But, they've got Char on defense and, Cassidy doesn't coach like that. I just don't see them getting caught in. And plus, they know how they've beaten the Maple Leafs in recent years. And, they didn't do it by trading chances. So I don't see that. But I think Tampa would be a good matchup for them. And I think it would be a fun matchup for hockey fans. Could we see every game 6-5? Maybe. That's certainly a potential for that anyway.
And here's a bit of trivia that we were both there to witness. The last Toronto Maple Leaf goalie to win a playoff series, we mentioned his name already tonight. It was Eddie Belfour.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's amazing to think that was 2004. I mean, that's pre-lockout. I mean, that's a long time to not win a playoff series.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, just think of how many playoffs the Edmonton Oilers have missed. If you'd have watched the Gretzky, Messier, Curry, Anderson led Oilers of the 1980s, you would never anticipate that, not far up the line, they'd miss the playoffs, 12 times in 13 seasons, or I don't know. I've lost track. Is it?
I read the other day that if they miss again this year, that'll be the worst. To go 13 out of the playoffs 13 times in 14 years will be the worst run in NHL history.
Well, I mean, and to me, that's why I think it's imperative that Ken Holland is aggressive at the trade deadline, because I think the Edmonton Oilers fans need a put to play. I think this is a similar situation to what we had last year in Columbus, where getting into the playoffs is almost of monumental importance. And not only that, but from the league's perspective, like we deserve as NHL fans to have Connor McDavid in the postseason. And I think if you get him and Draisaitl into the postseason, who knows? Like, could they win around? Well, I don't see them as going to be able to win the Stanley Cup. There are just too many holes. But, they could win a round or two. And I think it would be good for the sport to have Connor McDavid flying up the ice and making plays at this speed he does. Like, it's just a travesty that, that the most exciting player in the game, may be in the playoffs unless the Oilers get their act together.
So what you're saying is Ken Holland needs to be as aggressive at the trade deadline as Zach Kassian was with Matthew Tkachuk last night.
Well, I am saying that, and I give a lot of high marks to Tkachuk for doing what needed to be done. He got called out, and made much more sense to do it in this game than it did the last time they had met. This was a better opportunity for him. But the bottom line that Tkachuk can say at the end of the game is to point up to the scoreboard and said, we both needed 2 points, and we're the only team that got them. So.
Yeah, well, we're gonna watch that Pacific Division right down to the wire. I think maybe we'll talk some more about that wacky division when we meet again on Monday. But we're out of time today. I want to thank my good friend and guest Kevin Allen for joining us today on the podcast. We'll be back with you on Monday, and everybody have a great day.